I was very excited by the theme for this conference, which was all about empowering individuals. And one of the things that we work a lot with in our services and in our solutions that we provide to our customers is all around making them work faster, work more productively, and providing faster time to business value. And while we've found that software engineering and individual developers can be way, way, way more productive than they ever used to be, it's very much still, there's a lot of roadblocks still in place. It's very much the organizations that still get in the way of the productivity of their individuals. So I wanted to drill into this in a little more detail and look at some guiding principles as to how we can all be more productive within our organizations by somehow those organizations getting a little bit out of the way of our day-to-day work. As engineers, we're often dealing with very complex questions, very complex decisions which may not have one correct, unique answer. Very often we have to work in terms of trade-offs. I can go this way or I can go that way in the particular architectural decision or technology decision or design decision that I make. There's no one true answer. It's a trade-off. It's either this or that, and one way might be better than the other in a particular context. So how do I deal with those trade-offs? And very often when you're dealing with trade-offs, it helps to have some principles in mind. It helps to have some guiding principles that I can say, in the face of a decision, I will go one way or the other towards a particular principle. And one of those principles that we've sort of identified within our work is the principle of autonomy. Okay? So autonomy, dictionary definition, the freedom from external control or influence. Autonomy is synonymous with independence. I like to think in our day-to-day work of autonomy as being the ability to do something without having to ask someone else, right? The ability to do something without having to procure some hardware. The ability to do something without having to ask for the firewall ports to be open and waiting 3 weeks for that to happen. The ability to do something without going through an architecture change review because we don't quite know what will break when we make a change to this software. So autonomy is all about how do I get all the tools, the permission, and the knowledge that I need to deliver a solution for the business that provides rapid time to value. Okay? So let's step back a little and look at the context that we're all working in. And Brent mentioned this earlier. Everything's going faster. And I think Mark Andreessen, who's probably got a lot to do with inventing the kind of world that we live in at the moment. So Mark Andreessen was a founder of Netscape. He wrote the first web browser, and he's shaped a lot of the Silicon Valley world since then as a venture capitalist at Andreessen Horowitz. A few years ago, he wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal where he said, "Software is eating the world." And what he meant by that is that more and more companies who are coming to dominate their industries are doing so as software companies. You're either becoming a software company or you are a software company that just happens to offer financial services or just happens to support transport and logistics, right? These companies that are moving faster, that are disrupting their industries, are by and large software companies. They think with a software mindset. And they often operate at Moore's law scale and speed. This drives an imperative to move faster. All of the organizations that we work with are looking at these disruptive software companies and they're going, how can we be faster? How can we deliver new products and new services, new innovations to our customers faster than we are able to at the moment? So this chart comes from a survey from Boston Consulting Group. They do the survey every year, and they ask, what are the biggest obstacles that you face when it comes to innovation, when it comes to delivering new products and services to the market? And the number one answer is, it takes too long. We talk to a lot of different companies, and everywhere I go, everywhere I look, we have this gap between the expectations of the business. The business wants to change on monthly or quarterly timeframes in terms of delivering new products and services, but the IT, the technology organisations that underpin those businesses find that pace of change too fast. It's hard for them to keep up. It's hard for them to deliver to the pace that's required by the business. But this seems strange, because we live in a world that's dominated by technology, that's dominated by software, and it's all Moore's law, isn't it? We just ride the Moore's law curve, and we can get bigger, faster, and stronger each year. That's not quite true. It doesn't seem to pan out in our day-to-day lives. So this diagram comes from a Deloitte study, very recent one, where we looked at human capital and the way that human capital is changing, the demands on human capital are changing to meet the digital world, right? And one of the observations in this study is that while technology is accelerating at exponential rates, so the introduction of new technology, the pace at which we can do new things, it hasn't had much impact on our general business productivity. If you look locally in Australia, we had our big bump in productivity back in the 80s, and that was due to mainly industrial relations reform, right? Technology hasn't quite had the impact on our businesses that we would expect. And that's not just Australia, it's global. Even in the US, the technology powerhouse of the world, the productivity of our institutions has not shown the impact that we would expect from the benefits of technological change. And the observation that's come in this Deloitte report is that basically the impact of technology is not being felt everywhere at the same rate or at the same time. Tim O'Reilly has this saying. He says, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed yet, right? So some of us can feel the benefits of technology, but others not yet. And what the Deloitte report describes is the fact that individuals are benefiting most from technology. Individuals are becoming more productive. So individually, we've all got our smartphones, our supercomputers in our pockets, we're connected, we're agile, we can work individually at greater rates of productivity than ever before. But when we work within our organisations and within institutions, that's when roadblocks get in the way and reduce our ability to be productive, okay? So the power of the individual is awesome at the moment, but working within larger groups, there's still these drags on our productivity. It's interesting, economists talk about the theory of the firm and the idea that a firm exists because transaction costs inside the firm are lower than outside the firm. That idea is actually disappearing now. It's cheaper for transactions to go between individuals than it is within many firms these days. And that's what's driving some of these new changes in the way industry is organised. So the impact of new startups, the impact of the gig economy, transaction costs between individuals are lower than between organisations or even within organisations. So individuals are becoming more productive through the use of new technology. Businesses, not so much. There's some lagging characteristics within business. And when it comes to public policy, well, that's pretty much in the doldrums. We are not taking advantage of technological advances in the public policy arena. So why is this, and what lessons can we learn from this sort of thing? I think the lesson for us as technologists, as developers, as architects, as designers within our respective organisations is that we won't be more productive unless the organisation changes to allow us to do so. Okay? What are the roadblocks that are sitting in the way of our success? So there's a couple of big things that have happened in the last, let's say, 10 years that I think have become part of the mainstream in the way that we do our work. So the impact of cloud computing and of agile methodologies. These are probably the most visible changes that we've had in our day-to-day work lives. So let's have a look at what's happened there. The Agile Manifesto was written by a group of people in 2001. So that's, 16 years ago now. It's quite a way. Agile is, I think, now mainstream. Most organisations practice Agile or are attempting to practice Agile. But it's taken a long time to get to there. Agile was really developed as a reaction to the big bang projects that took very long time frames, that didn't deliver value for literally years, right? And the Agile Manifesto really set out the key elements of the Agile methodologies, right? Small, cross-functional teams, early and continuous delivery of working software, right? We value working software over copious amounts of documentation. An emphasis on face-to-face communication with stand-ups and small, short meetings where you can resolve things quickly. And an emphasis on motivated individuals. Give the individuals everything they need, the tools, the permission, the knowledge that they need to deliver their solution. Okay? So Agile methods succeed by essentially reducing communication lines. Okay? In the big old waterfall methodologies, the lines of communication were enormous. They were 3 years long, and you didn't know that you had a defect in your design or your code or even your business value proposition until you got into production 2 to 3 years later and, oh, we got that wrong. So let's go back 3 years and start again. That loop, Brent talked about the loop of change. And there's a concept called the OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, and act. That was invented by an Air Force colonel, I've forgotten his name now, back in the 60s when he looked at dogfighting. When you're when you're in a dogfight, it's the pilot who can go through that OODA loop faster that wins the dogfight, basically. And we're all, to a certain extent, in this kind of dogfight. We need to iterate on our solutions. We need to iterate on the way that we do business. So shorter, rapid iteration times. When you conceive of a new idea, a new innovation or a solution, you build that, you deploy it, you learn lessons from it, you go back and you iterate. We need to go through that iteration loop on a time scale of days or weeks or at most months rather than years. So this is the key element to Agile methodologies and why it has been beneficial, is that it reduces that iteration cycle and allows us to be more agile. The other big thing that we've seen is cloud computing. It used to take literally months to order all your hardware, order your kit from somebody, and get it shipped, often out from the US, racked and stacked in the data center. It would take longer to provision the hardware than it would to actually build the solution. And that whole cycle, a lot of that delay in building our solutions has disappeared. Startups now don't need to go out and spend their Series A funding on buying more hardware or buying hardware full stop. They just go straight into building a solution and testing it with the marketplace. So cloud computing has also removed a lot of these dependencies, a lot of these blockages on our productivity. So the key elements have been mapped out by NIST. So this is from the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the US. They define cloud computing. And one of the key elements that they define is on-demand self-service. If I've got a credit card and access to Amazon or Azure or Google Cloud or whomever, I can swipe that credit card, I can have hardware provisioned instantly, on demand, when I need it. So that's really autonomy. That's a classic example of how autonomy enables my productivity as a developer, as a technologist. So we have two examples there where autonomy is not the only ingredient to better productivity, but it is a key ingredient, right? Agile methods talk about small autonomous teams that can get things done. And cloud computing gives us a huge amount of autonomy in our infrastructure procurement and PaaS and software as a service as well, platforms as a service. So autonomy is all about allowing teams to work as independently as possible, to remove decision bottlenecks, to remove the dependencies on other teams, and to increase our delivery velocity. So this is a model that Spotify have come up with. The universe is a wonderful thing. Everything's got 2 dimensions and 4 quadrants, so we can do that with this environment as well. And in Spotify's universe, we have autonomy in 1 dimension. So how autonomous is my team? And alignment is the other one. So alignment is all about the shared vision, the shared goals that we have within the organization. And the ideal state, according to Spotify, is where our teams have high autonomy and high alignment. There's a shared vision and everyone has permission to move towards that shared vision and goal. We have the ability to get things done. So look, that's not a universal thing. If you're in maybe a support role, you have lower autonomy but still high alignment. Where things go wrong is where you have low alignment and low autonomy. That's kind of drudge work. We're probably never going to get anything done. You're spinning your wheels. Or where you have high autonomy but low alignment. That's often where chaos reigns in an organization. You're going somewhere fast, but no one can really agree on where you're going. Okay. So Agile's great. It's delivered productivity. Cloud computing is awesome. It's also delivered productivity. But in most of our organizations, change is still really hard. Why is change still so hard? I talk about inertia as being the opposite of agility. Agility is the ability to change on a dime, to move quickly in response to an external force. When you can't do that, when you can't change rapidly, we have inertia. And there's still a lot of sources of inertia in our infrastructure, in our systems architecture. So let's have a look at those kinds of things. So within our infrastructure, although we've made a lot of progress in cloud computing, there's still a gap in deployment. Deployment into production is still a very hard thing. And what we've seen very recently has been containers, or more specifically, the Docker open source project has really come to the rescue. As Brent said, containers have been around for at least a decade or so. I think Solaris introduced them or something. Anyway, or they were even on mainframes. But what Docker brought to the table was standardization around the interface to containers, a standard API that you can use to construct a container image, to start the container, to run it, to monitor it, to shut it down, all of that life cycle. So the Docker project brought portability and standardization to containers. So that gives us a lot of huge benefits. It gives us portability between our environments. With the Docker container, we can move from cloud to on-prem to other cloud. It gives us packaging. It gives us the ability to package up a whole environment and then ship that somewhere else where it can run seamlessly. No longer do we have the problem, well, it works on my laptop, what's wrong with yours? It opens up a huge number of possibilities for automation, container orchestration, and platforms as a service. And here I need to talk about OpenShift. And I want to invite you all to come talk to our guys at the booth out there, because we're doing a lot of things with OpenShift, all based around container management, container orchestration, providing huge benefits to ourselves and to our customers. And part of those benefits is this separation of concerns between developers and operation. We're removing the dependencies between those people. And that's giving us better autonomy for our developers, better autonomy for our operations people. The other area where there remains a lot of tight coupling dependencies is systems architecture. The poster child for, I think, systems architecture is probably Amazon. And many of you have probably already heard of Bezos' big mandate, where one day in 2002, Bezos faced the problem of how does he scale his organization. As the number of people grow, the lines of communication get longer, delays and confusion ensue, and the temptation to introduce technical debt comes into play. And Bezos wanted to cut this off before it occurred. And what he did was he came up with two real innovations. One was the idea of service interfaces, right? So service orientation was a thing, it was a relatively new thing, but he recognized the importance of services as being a way to create modularization in his organization to control and channel the communications between teams. The other innovation there was the two-pizza team, the small, autonomous team that you could feed with two pizzas that have the permission and the tools and the knowledge to get things done. So once again, we have autonomy. The public face of this is Amazon's letter to shareholders in 2010, where he describes their approach, service orientation, as an approach which reduces side effects and allows services to evolve at their own pace without impacting the other components of the overall system. This is an incredibly succinct description of autonomy in your systems architecture. Many of us have had different experiences of service orientation, and I think the first generation of SOA, we really went through a lot of the things that we were told to do with SOA, but we forgot about autonomy. We forgot about developer self-service, the ability for developers to find the services, to sign up and use them without having to ask permission. We forgot about building services as independent, autonomous modules, so treating your services or your APIs as a product. These were things that some of the web startups understood well. So think of companies like Twilio, like Salesforce when they were young, building their business services and exposing them out as APIs that you could consume in an autonomous fashion. So really, APIs become the operating system of your business. Autonomy. And that's come to become very popular. It's a very buzzy concept these days as microservices. So done properly, perhaps it is. Perhaps there's other elements to it. But microservices really emphasize autonomy in the way that you build the services. The whole idea that you've got products, not projects, that you've got decentralized governance, small teams that manage a service from inception through to running in production. Microservices are all around removing dependencies and making these modular services as autonomous as possible. Which really brings us to the organizational approach. So we've talked about removing dependencies in our infrastructure, increasing our autonomy in our systems architecture, and we need to look also broader at the organization. So culture eats strategy for breakfast. How do we build a culture within our organizations that really emphasizes autonomy? A lot of people are talking about platforms now, business platforms, technology platforms, and some people at Harvard Business School have looked at platform businesses, and they came up with some observations about the shared characteristics of platforms. All platforms, whether they're manufacturing platforms or maybe a shopping center or a Facebook community or a logistics platform, etc., all of them share characteristics. One is modularization, to control the complexity. The other characteristic is that some parts of the platform are stable. They're the stable things that you build everything on top of. And then other parts of the operating system are encouraged to vary. The economists call these complements, right? And the most stable elements are the interfaces between these two. So as an example, think about the Apple iOS platform. And you can think about all sorts of different platforms, operating systems, dating platforms, etc. They all share these characteristics. You've got a stable core, which provides basic services, and then people innovate on top of that. These are the app vendors, the people that develop and put the apps into the iOS platform, if you like. So all of these platforms have a stable component which represents the operating system, and then an area that you can build in an autonomous fashion, apps where you can innovate and deliver business value. So think about your organization as a platform. We tend to view our IT organizations as very homogeneous, right? Same funding models, everything is run as projects. We apply the same approaches to core systems as we do to systems of innovation and differentiation. And what we need to do is start to differentiate the different parts of our technology organizations, our organizations in general. Think about a core, stable platform, which is probably composed of your core systems, your off-the-shelf ERPs, your CRMs, your systems of record, your billing systems, financials, all of those things that you buy off the shelf, and run them. Don't try to customize them. Don't do all of those things. Build your customizations around them in a microservices architecture. And here in this hypothetical systems architecture, I've got OpenShift running there within the domains, which are running the different microservices, the integration services. That's a platform as a service that we can use to accelerate the functions that we expose out of the core platform. But then the apps that we build on top of that platform, these are our systems of innovation, our systems of differentiation. The mobile apps, the web apps, the business processes, all of the things that we need to make our businesses more agile are the apps, the things that we encourage to change on top of that stable platform. So the platform has characteristics of stability, a product management stance. We're building these assets as open-ended, stable products which will last for years and through many generations of app development and technology change. We're building them, designing them for broad use. We're using things like pooled funding and chargeback models, and we're providing domain autonomy, so business owners that run those APIs as an internal business, if you like. And then the apps are where we encourage variety. We have project-level management. We're designing for specific usage, and we're utilising business funding. Too many times, all of our projects are dealt with as apps, even though they might be core infrastructure, and we don't end up getting core infrastructure. An important thing to think about is those internal APIs. This is the dividing line which provides stability, which provides abstraction between the apps at the top, which are built in an autonomous fashion, and the core platform at the bottom. The important thing is the core platform also needs autonomy. We need to be building those core systems independent of today's latest great new initiative, because tomorrow's great new initiative is going to be different. Okay, so autonomy above the line and below the line. And a good way to achieve that is by splitting our business up into these domains and allowing the domains to change in independent fashion. So I want you to hopefully go away and think about autonomy. When you're dealing with trade-offs, think about which decisions will remove dependencies, which will remove technical debt, which will allow my people, developers and business alike, to be more autonomous. At the infrastructure level, think about automation and DevOps and platforms as a service. At systems architecture, think about autonomous APIs as the operating system for your bank, your insurance company, your utility. Think about autonomy for our teams. Small, cross-functional, two-pizza teams that can get things done. And at your organizational level, think about building your organization as a platform that will encourage change and innovation. Okay, I've gone a few minutes over. Apologies. I think we're up for coffee now, aren't we? Thank you.